Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Today we have Dr. Suprit Bindra with us. Ma'am is BPT and MPT in musculoskeletal physiotherapist. She is gold medalist for both bachelor's and master's of physiotherapy. Ma'am has done her PhD in back pain. She is assistant professor, Department of Physiotherapy, Sri Guru Granth Sahib World University, Fatehgarh Sahib. Ma'am is having 13 years of total clinical and academic experience. She has authored many chapters in various books, and she is author of many articles in various reputed national and international journals. She is chairperson of various scientific sessions and committee member of the Indian Association of Physiotherapists. Ma'am has delivered several invited talks and webinars as a resource person, and today ma'am is going to deliver her lecture on the informed consent. Informed consent is one of the founding principles as the physiotherapist or the other researchers, when they are dealing with the human, they have to take informed consent. So what is the basic purpose of taking informed consent, and what things we have to consider while taking informed consent, that madam is going to highlight today. So her lecture will be fruitful for all the listeners. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. And I am thankful to Dr. Chaitanya Shah and the organizing team of Parul University for giving me this opportunity. So, as already stated by ma'am, I'll be talking about the importance of and how to obtain informed consent and many related things in my lecture today. So, now informed consent is a very important thing to consider for conduct of ethical research, and it not only applies to clinical trials, but it is essential for any kind of research that involves human subjects. And prior to your data collection, obtaining informed consent is mandatory. So the learning objectives of my talk today will be that what is informed consent, how has informed consent evolved, what is the classification of informed consent, what are the basic elements for written informed consent documents, what is the informed consent process flow, what are some waivers that can be given to informed consent, what are challenges and barriers in informed consent process, and what are all these strategies to enhance the informed consent process. So, what is informed consent? I hope my slides are moving. Okay.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
informed consent is a consent given by a competent individual. Here, I would highlight a competent individual who has received the necessary information, who has adequately understood the information, and after considering the information, has arrived at a decision for participation in the trial. Here, information is information regarding the trial, that what are all the objectives of the trial, what will be its methodology, how many groups will be formed, and so on. So without having been subjected to any coercion, any undue influence or duress or inducement or intimidation, so without any pressure, one has received a necessary information, one has adequately understood the information related to the trial or the research that the individual is going to be a part of, and has arrived
Ma'am,
at a
sorry to
decision for
interrupt you,
participation.
but your
Yes,
slide
ma'am.
is disappeared. Like you have to continue with same window.
Okay, shall
Yes,
I?
yes, yes,
Okay,
yes. Now
okay,
it's visible. Ma'am, it has disappeared.
just a minute. So, is it visible now?
Yes, yes. Now it's
Okay.
visible.
So, I was talking about that individual has received necessary information, he has adequately understood the information about the trial, and has voluntarily arrived at the decision for the participation in the trial. And this is documented by a means of written, signed, and dated informed consent form. So important thing is it is written, it is signed, and it also bears a date of signature. So why informed consent? So there are certain facts related to the conduct of any kind of research that researchers need the person to enroll. So any research that involves human subjects, you need to enroll the participants. At the same time, researchers can do harm. So the patient should be very well informed in the informed consent sheet, in the patient information sheet, that is the first page of the informed consent form, that what are all the risks associated with participation in such a research. And certain protocols may require specific procedures that may not be the best alternative. For example, if you are taking two different group of treatment, maybe each one of individually they are not having the same effect, or maybe one is having a detrimental effect also. So researchers may be blinded to potential alternatives, and there is certain therapeutic misconception of research subjects. So this all facts must be known to the subjects that are going to be a part of your research. So informed consent is no longer an option, and it is now a must under the current guidelines and regulations. Now, what is informed consent? It is actually a communication process between the researcher and the participant, and it starts before the research is initiated. That is, as soon as you are done with your formation of your research proposal, and prior to conduct of your data collection, it is mandatory to obtain an informed consent, and it continues throughout the duration of the study. So, what do you mean by this? So, the patient, if we abide by the ethical principles, the patient has, or the subject under your study has a right to withdraw from the study at any point in your study. So this continues throughout the duration of the study, and and the patient needs to be informed about each and everything of the research. So it is necessary to conduct ethical research, not only for clinical trials, but any type of research, let it be diagnostic, therapeutic, interventional, bioequivalent, social, or behavioral studies also. And it's a key document in protecting the right of the study subject. Now, procurement of the consent, it ensures human dignity of the participant and also shows respect for them, that participants, they exercise their right in a sense. So it assures that prospective research subjects will understand the nature of the research and will knowledgeably and voluntarily decide to participate or not. So this decision of participation in a trial is purely voluntary. So let's see how this informed consent has evolved. So the evolution of the informed consent, it dates back to the Nazis' experiments, to the experiments of the German physicians that were done in 1947. That is during World War II. Now, German physicians, they conducted pseudo-scientific medical experiments utilizing thousands of concentration camp prisoners, and without their consent. Now, they exposed the prisoners to freezing experiments, sterilization experiments, then they even did time to death testing in response to stressors in healthy volunteers. There were organ transplant experiments also done on healthy volunteers. And as a result, most of the subjects were either permanently crippled or died as a result of these experiments. So the outcome of these Nazi experiments, which were an example of research done in a wrong way, was that 23 German scientists were taken to court, 7 were acquitted, 9 imprisoned, and 7 were given a death sentence. So this Nuremberg trial led to emergence of the Nuremberg Code. So this Nuremberg Code was developed in response to these trials, which performed unethical experimentation during World War II. And the code was the first major international document to provide guidelines on research ethics. So the Nuremberg Code made voluntary consent a requirement in clinical research studies, emphasizing that consent can be voluntary only if the participants are able to consent. Then They are free from coercion, that is from any outside pressure, and the participants very well comprehend or understand the risk and benefits included with the research. So the code also states that the researchers should minimize risk and harm and make sure that the risks involved in the study do not significantly outweigh the potential benefits, that the study should have minimum of risk. And it also ensures that researchers should use appropriate studies designs, and it guarantees the participants the freedom of withdrawal from the research at any time. So then came the Declaration of Helsinki in 1964, which stated or which laid down a set of 12 ethical principles, and this was developed by World Medical Association in Helsinki, and it emphasizes the distinction between medical care that directly benefits the patient and research that may or may not provide direct benefit. So Declaration of Helsinki was regarded as a cornerstone document of human research ethics and included within the clinical trial protocols, and it was revised from time to time, and the latest revision was done in 2008. Then came the Belmont Report in 1979. So the Belmont Report, it laid down three major principles underlying the code of conduct of any research. So these three principles were principle of autonomy, beneficence, and justice. So what is autonomy? It is individuals being treated as capable of taking their decisions for themselves. And it also stated that people with diminished autonomy, will discuss who are the people with diminished autonomy, they may be protected. That is the people who are not able to, who are vulnerable, who are not able to give their consent. For example, if someone is in a comatose state or someone is cognitively impaired, so one is in a vulnerable state. So, autonomy, principle of autonomy, it was laid down to ensure that the right of every individual was protected. Then is the principle of beneficence. So, an obligation to protect persons from harm by maximizing benefits and minimizing risks. So, research should be of benefit and there should be minimum risk involved. And then is justice. Justice stated, principle of justice stated a fair distribution of benefits and burdens of research. Then in 1982 came the guidelines given by Council for International Organization of Medical Sciences. So these guidelines identified 26 separate items of information an investigator must provide to trial participants prior to obtaining their informed consent. Then came the International Conference on Harmonization Good Clinical Practice in 1996. It was developed to provide a unified standard for the European Union, Japan, and USA to protect the rights and well-being of subjects involved in clinical trials and to facilitate mutual acceptance of clinical data by the regulatory authorities in these regions in the year of 1996. Our Indian Council of Medical Research Guidelines, that is ICMR guidelines in 2000. So it laid the ethical guidelines for research involving human subjects, and it ensured that these guidelines ensured that the participation must be voluntary. Participants must be fully apprised of research, that is the participants must have full knowledge about their research, what are the potential benefits, what are the potential harms, what are all the risks involved, what if there are any monetary benefits involved, and so on. So the investigator must obtain informed consent. Assent may be obtained where possible for minors. I'll shortly be discussing what is assent. And requirement of consent can be waived by an ethical committee if risk is minimal. This also we'll discuss. But important thing here is that no single model represents a blueprint for all countries. So there are general ethical principles that need to be followed, but we cannot say that there is a single model to which we can abide for these purposes. Now, then comes the classification of informed consent. So there are certain terms related to informed consent. So what is a consent? Consent involves an adult subject capable of giving permission to participate in a research study. And the subject must be 18 years of age and competent to make decision to participate. Then what is parental consent or permission? When the children or minors are included in the research, the parent or the guardian must sign a parental permission consent document. What is assent? Now, if it's a child's affirmative agreement to participate in research, so if the subject is 7 to 17 years of age,